Hello, everybody, and welcome back to First Ring Daily, where nothing has gone on this week and everything is just quiet, so we're just going to end it here.
Yeah, what a quiet week. It was nice to get away for a couple of days and just relax, contemplate where my daughter might go to school. It's been nice.
Yeah, other things you can contemplate too right now is check out cloudberrylab.com/FRD for a free trial offer that will be going away almost immediately, so make sure you go grab that. We'll talk about that more here in a second. But, so how's
Brad,
school?
if I could just compliment you briefly, your transition to that little Cloudberry piece was nicely done.
Thank you. You know, there's been a lot of things happening this week. It's been a little busy. But,
Has it? Why? What happened?
I don't know if you saw this, Paul, and this is... Some might say it's a big deal, but Microsoft pushed out a new build of Windows 10 Redstone 5. Yeah.
Neat. Anything else?
Nope.
Yeah.
Terry said he's going to golf a little bit more, but that's, I think, it.
Yep.
That's it. So,
I don't think I've left my house in 2 months, and the second I step out the door and get on a plane, the whole planet collapses around me. You know, It's unbelievable.
Yep. So for those of you who aren't aware, which I can't imagine is many people because Microsoft put this everywhere, we wrote it up everywhere, and Microsoft announced a massive reorganization this week. Terry Myerson will be leaving the company. I actually had that as a tip about 2.5 months ago, and I kind of floated that idea around for a while. And then I got a tip yesterday at about 6 a.m. that, hey, this is going live today, which is how Mahedi and I got it posted out so quickly after it was announced. Paul comes online. He's like, hey, how are we doing this? I'm like, it's already done, which was great.
Right. Yeah, because I caught wind of it, and it was like, yeah, I have to say, I wasn't expecting that response from you guys. That was good.
Yep. And to kind of just kick this off, because there is a lot to chew on here, and we're not talking about the food at Colorado universities, but I think the title of Satya's letter says it all. It just says, embracing our future, no question about it, intelligent cloud and intelligent edge, and I don't think he's referring to the browser.
Right. Yeah, I mean, listen, there's these little pieces in his memo, or whatever we want to call that point to some form of hope, for Windows, but allow me to come in and swoop in and just destroy all that hope, because this is like terrible, terrible news. And, we'll see. Obviously, they're pushing off to build and saying, stay tuned, that we have news about the future. But, if you read between the lines, if you read the lines, let's put it that way, what you see is a very clear indication that Windows is being repositioned as part of a broader cloud strategy. And let's say it's one of the more minor bullet points on that list of bullet points for Microsoft 365. And, the intelligent edge itself kind of speaks to this notion of not just Windows devices, but non-Windows devices, right? I mean, Microsoft sees its software and services running everywhere. And, this de-emphasis has been a long time in the coming, I think. And, of course, we've spoken about that a lot.
So here's sort of, people are probably wondering why, maybe. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why, but here's one little factoid I think that not many people have probably thought about. Microsoft, I would bet, very clearly can look at, since the launch of Windows 10, they can chart out the revenue that Windows is going to bring in for probably the next 10 years. And it doesn't matter, other than security, I don't think there's any features they're going to push out there that are going to convert 10 million new people a month. Other than security, they know exactly how much money Windows is going to bring in. They could throw $10 billion at Windows, and that revenue number is not going to change.
It's not just that too. Healthy ecosystems have vibrant other revenue streams, right? If you look at something like iOS and the amount of money that broader platform generates through the store and through all the services that Apple offers, it's just amazing. It's what I call the engaged user base.
Yep.
And that's the difference between Windows and iOS, or Windows and Android. It's not that Windows isn't high quality. It's not that we don't rely on it and use it every day. It's that as a user base, they're just not engaged. And we're using the same old tools we've always used. We do rely on them. I don't mean to suggest they're not important. They're very important to me personally. But we're not running out buying new apps all the time. We're not excited to see what's going on in the store. We're not looking to spend more money. Enterprises in particular, which represents probably 2/3 of Microsoft's customer base and revenues from Windows, in particular, are not interested in upgrading.
Yeah.
There's a steady revenue stream there, but that revenue stream doesn't change if Windows 10 has HoloLens capabilities or 3D things and emojis and whatever. They don't care about stuff like that. And so, for people like me who have been kind of complaining about the nonsense stuff that's going on in Windows 10, maybe the silver lining here is that some of that nonsense slows down, meaning we maybe adhere to more of an enterprise type release schedule, which I think would be a positive change for everybody. And maybe there'll be less of an emphasis on that, nonsense functionality that I always complain about.
Yeah. The interesting thing here is they effectively took Terry's job and divided it up in between two people. We have Scott Guthrie, who is kind of leading. This is not the correct term, but I tend to think of it as like the technical, the AI, the cloud type stuff. And then we have, and I'm going to butcher this name as I do with every person and every name that comes on here. It's Rajesh Jha, I believe, something along those lines. And he is from the Office fame, which Office obviously has done exceptionally well inside of Microsoft. He's going to be running and in charge of, I should say, the more kind of fun things up front that you might interact with, because I believe Joe Belfiore will be reporting up to him, and Joe is going to be kind of the shell guy. And then the core side of Windows, which this is interesting. I'm curious on your take on this, Paul, because the core of Windows S, the bits that make it run, they are putting that under Azure, under Jason Zander. And
great. So that's actually three made groups, by the way. I would say.
Yeah. So Jason's going to be kind of the core guy. Joe will kind of be the front end guy, and then they report up to their bosses. Neither of these people, Joe nor Xander, are on the senior leadership team. Neither of them to report directly to Satya. It's a demotion of Windows.
Is one of about 5 groups that are under whatever that new Office guy is from the devices and experiences, blah blah blah, whatever. Who cares what these names are? They're only in the last 6 months anyway.
Hold on, I'm not done yet. What? Keep on. Hold on. And so they have Windows, and they went through this massive initiative called One Core, which was supposed to bring everything together. And now they are actually just slamming Server right next to Windows, and that's kind of where they're taking this, at least from a core component, which doesn't sound so great if you're a casual user looking forward to the next great feature of Windows.
Well, so I would say the core of Windows, whatever we've called it at any point in time, has kind of volleyballed between two groups, the client group and the server group. And the server group back in the day was part of, it was like server and tools. It was essentially the same part of the business that was Visual Studio, SQL Server, et cetera. These days, server is Azure, right? So Jason Zander comes up out of that server org. And I think returning development of the core OS to the adults, as I'll refer to them, that part makes plenty of sense. That the adults are now working on Azure is a little disheartening, right? Because, again, this kind of speaks to the fact that they see Windows as a component of this cloud-based future. And so, Terry's biggest accomplishment in the eyes of Satya Nadella, as I read the memo, is that he was able to turn Windows into a thing that is maintained and serviced like a server, service rather. And that allows it to fit more easily into the Microsoft 365 Pi, where you have things like Office 365 and the EMS/management stuff, which is also all cloud-based or maintained like a service. So it fits in. He did the job. Congratulations, you get to leave now. The fact that Windows itself has been torn asunder, is very disheartening. Though that's the issue with this. And there is that kind of experiences team, and then the sub-experiences team, which involves what Windows experiences, which is the Joe Belfiore part. There's something called like new experiences, which is interesting because they have the things that are not under Joe Belfiore. I'm a little bit worried about Joe Belfiore, to be honest. I don't understand how this, I don't know. We'll see what happens there. But, as a Terry guy and as someone who is working on perhaps the least interesting or innovative part of Windows these days, that might not be a great place for him. I don't know. We'll see. But I think the Brad Anderson management stuff is all set. That's good.
Yep.
That makes sense. It's fine. But it's that experiences thing, and it's a bunch of groups under there. Panos Panay is running the new devices group, which makes sense. The first party devices, which we now think of as Surface. It's fine. We're going to see more of that stuff. But that's not a big emphasis, right? The Surface business is tiny. They don't move very fast, and there is just like there is with anything, some kind of core group of users that's really excited about that stuff, but it just doesn't amount to much of anything from revenues or market share or however you want to look at it. And it's not clear that it's driving anything these days. So, I don't know. I just, th- th- this whole thing is kind of depressing because Terry Myerson. I mean, whatever anyone thinks of him, and I know inside of Microsoft is somewhat controversial. The things we don't see on the outside are the competitive and political things that occur. How do you even become someone in his position? Think about the fact that this guy, who nobody knew really, took over for Windows Phone at one point, which a lot of people wouldn't have noticed. But then that group took over, and he took over, Big Windows, which is high profile, and people did notice. You have to have certain skills and certain attitude, certain personality type to kind of exist in that world and to succeed in that world. And so there's that stuff that I can't really speak to. But from the outside of Microsoft, I think he was the best advocate we had for Windows, and I think part of the reason he's gone is that he was the one pushing back against a lot of this kind of what I would call Satya Nadella dictated nonsense that required Windows to conform to the rest of the company. And this whole AI plus accessibility plus blah, 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 whatever stuff doesn't come from Terry Myerson. It comes from Satya Nadella. The notion that Windows has to behave as a service, which frankly doesn't make a ton of sense, came from above. And so I just, I care about, I know you do, I think people who read the site do, people who are Windows enthusiasts or Microsoft enthusiasts by and large are not enthusiastic about the 117th Azure service. What they care about is Windows,
Right.
And that's the thing I think we have to be fearful for today, because we've been talking about, the future of Microsoft's this cloud thing. And that's just words until they smack Windows around and they break it up into a million pieces. And now it's getting really real.
Yeah. To put some contextualness to that, imagine you're in a situation, you walk into a room, and the boss at the head of the table says, "Hey, you're going to fix Windows 8."
Yes.
Yeah, like that's...
Yeah, it's like as you describe it, it sounds like you're meeting the boss, and you kind of kiss his ring, and you hope you don't get whacked on the way out the door.
Yep.
Yeah, sure. Windows Vista was fixed with Windows 7. I feel that success was overly touted as a big deal. It was very easy to fix Windows Vista. Windows 7 is just Windows Vista Service Pack 3 or whatever. I mean, that was an easy accomplishment. Fixing Windows 8 was very interesting and required a lot of work. I mean, they really kind of mucking around with it. And to me, the thing I really celebrated with Windows 10 when it first came out was the return of the PC stuff. That we're going to acknowledge that literally 100% of our users are in fact using this thing on a PC, and it needs to work well on PCs. It needs to do that. But if you look at the app platform today, it is still very much touch first. It still has that terribleness from the Windows 8 days. The mistake. It's like we can't get rid of this thing that is suddenly a vestigial holdover from the recent past. The notion that Windows can work effectively on different device types is fine. Obviously, they proved it to some degree. They can make it work, but I feel like it needs to be more tailored than it is for those device types. That Windows desktop on a tablet maybe isn't the thing that makes the most sense. It may be too late to change that, but Xbox One is a great example of a very specifically tailored Windows 10 experience. I don't think anyone would look at that and say, this is just like Windows on my desktop, because it doesn't need to be. It shouldn't be on a device like that.
Mm-hmm. Which kind of makes you wonder. Kind of makes you wonder if this whole mashing together was worth it.
Yes. Yeah, amounted to nothing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
the hollow success of we have created a single platform that runs across all these devices.
Paul, if you can hear me, you're cutting out. You were doing so well. He was doing so well. You still there?
Yeah, it's just kind of... I'm sure that's me, and I'm using Wi-Fi from outside there.
Yeah, you were doing so well right up until that point, but now you're back. Welcome back. But, well, we got a nice little break here. Nope, Miracast is not... Why did that start playing the YouTube video? That's impressive. Wow. Wow.
There we go.
But, folks, if you are dealing with backup issues, you're looking for a better backup platform, you're jumping around between the clouds, Cloudberry Lab has got you covered. They can back up your data to any cloud, protect you from ransomware, and make your life a little bit easier. Make sure to check them out at cloudberrylab.com/FRD and grab that trial offer, because it'll be going away here very soon. But they've got to, put it anywhere. Azure, which we're talking about today, Google Cloud, S3, all that good stuff. Bring your data. They've got the cloud selections, and they'll make your life a little bit better. But I think that's an interesting point here to transition right back into where we were, because I didn't even think about that until you brought it up. But the whole one core thing has amounted into nothing.
Yeah. Well, Azure, like I said, Azure is came out of the server group, right? So Azure was was taken from Windows Server, obviously, and they tailored it for the cloud, if you will. And Windows Server was co-developed, is still, I guess, co-developed with Windows Client, right? It's the same core, et cetera, et cetera. Azure has gone off and become its own thing. I mean, Azure doesn't require a desktop environment. It doesn't look like Windows Server, but if you access it through command line interfaces or whatever consoles, I'm sure there are many similarities, and you can co-manage on-prem servers rather with Azure services. Absolutely, that's all great and everything. But that's maybe another good example of it doesn't have to be the same.
Yeah.
There's no. It's sort of an artificial benefit for these. It never amounted to anything, I don't think. And maybe the failure of phone is what everyone will blame, for that. Whatever, but it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, and so on his exit here, on LinkedIn, he wrote up I thought a pretty nice post. I mean, he didn't really hold anything back. He was extremely self-critical. Talked about the wins and the losses. A couple things he brought up here. Roughly 3 years later, because remember, I believe they made this announcement at Build. They said that they would have, and they've corrected it since, but they'd have 1 billion users within 3 years. We're at roughly about that 3-year mark, because remember, they were talking fiscal year for Microsoft, not calendar year. Terry said in his post there's somewhere 675-ish million. He said close to 700, but so I'm guessing 675 active Windows 10 users.
Yeah. So some website took his quote from there, and because he mentioned they based Windows Phone on what he called an incomplete Windows CE system, right? And so Microsoft's componentized mobile version of Windows that dates back to the mid-90s, Windows CE, went through various permutations. Windows Mobile 6.x back in the whatever time frame that was, the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Was the continuation of that product line, and of course they built Windows Phone on that originally. And someone said, Meyerson blames Windows CE for Windows Phone's failure, and that's not what he wrote. So first of all, what he wrote was that we based Windows Phone on this thing, and in other words, the thing you blame is not Windows CE, a technology. You blame the people who decided to use it. But you also have to put it in the context of the time. The iPhone had happened. They knew they had to start over from scratch. There was another group at Microsoft. There was a Windows Mobile team that was pushing their own Windows Mobile 7 as the alternative, and they lost out to the people that wanted to make Windows Phone and start over from scratch. The thing is, they had to get to market quickly because they could see what was going to happen with the iPhone. He talks about that. How you could tell this was going to take off. This was going to be everything. And so the only way they could get moving quickly was to use that thing that was ready to go, which was the Windows CE core. And if you are familiar with the history of Windows Phone, you know that they changed platforms 3 times.
Yep.
And it wasn't until Windows Phone 8 that they started really merging the phone efforts with the the PC-based efforts, and that is, you could say, they should have started with that. They weren't ready to start with that in 2000, whatever year it was. It's just, an unfortunate matter of timing. And so, by the time Windows 10 Mobile came out, which was a version of Windows 10, and it was that one core kind of shared blah, 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 whatever, it was too late. And of course, that thing was a freaking nightmare, but they had started over again. It was like they kept restarting Windows Phone because they kept running into technological roadblocks with the platform that they had at the time. And so, yeah, it's just,
yep.
It's too bad.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting here, Paul, as you were talking about at the beginning, actually both were, how they've split up Windows so much. Obviously, changes aren't going to happen tomorrow, but there's a whole new team leading Windows from every different side. I would not be surprised to see, I don't know if shake-up's the right word, but definitely we're going to see some strategy shift, I would absolutely think, from what's happening today.
Yeah, even before this happened, there are kind of 2 sides to Windows. There's the Windows that serves the broader revenue stream at Microsoft, which is businesses. And like I said, they don't care about, in fact, they very much do not want constant updates, and you get that kind of pushback there. But then you have like a very much smaller but more vocal user base of enthusiasts and so forth, the guys that would be in the Windows Insider program and live and die on every build that comes out and all that kind of stuff. And the kind of stuff that occurs on that side of the fence is detrimental to Windows and detrimental to the future. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see changes there. And so I don't know, who would. I mean, I don't know what form they'd take, but you can't even say something like, it's not like we can say there's a new sheriff in town. We'll see what Bob, the boss of everything, has to say about any of this, because there is no Bob, boss of everything. I don't even, I'm sure the Windows Insider. Actually, I'm not sure. I assumed the Windows Insider program falls under Jason Zander, I guess, because it's. I don't even know.
Yeah, I think it does.
Who was the boss of the Windows Insider program? I don't know, but if it is Jason Zander, those guys could have some problems, because they come out of a much more formal. Regimented kind of world, and
well, they live in a cloud world. I mean, they have to be. They can't screw up a server build that's going to impact a $1 billion data center. That's not an option.
No, I mean, we're in kind of what I think of as the Google model now with Windows. We're adding features at the last second, right before this thing gets shipped off to RTM. They're not really tested very thoroughly. It's fair to say the last two versions of Windows 10 have been a lot more reliable than was the case in the past. And so they've kind of gotten on top of some of that stuff. But, there's so many layers to Windows. It's not just the core OS. It's the applications that sit on top of it and so forth. And they all have different update schedules. And it's reached some form of madness at this point. I mean, I don't know how anyone keeps track of this stuff. But there are so many things to support, all of which have their own schedules, none of which are acceptable to enterprise, and I just don't.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is I have no idea what's going to change. It's very clear things are going to change.
Yep. And the chat room, Tony and Kevin are both saying yes. It was confirmed that Jason Zander is the new boss of the Insider program. So that's how.
Yeah, I mean, the thing we interact with as users with the Insider program, aside from the Feedback Hub stuff, I guess, is more. I don't know. It's almost like PR type stuff, right? I mean, but of course, what they're doing is building Windows, which is an engineering effort and is like serious computer science. And it makes sense. Of course, that would fall under Jason Zander.
Yep. So it'll be a lot of things moving around. Some people were getting real freaked out that Xbox wasn't mentioned, but that doesn't really fall into the Windows and Devices org. That's under Phil Spencer. I'm not concerned about Xbox at all, especially since they just quite literally announced at E3 they're going bigger and badder than ever.
There's nothing to worry about Xbox at all. In fact, there are some questions, but they're not going to impact anything. And my big question for Xbox is, why is Xbox/gaming not a top-level business at Microsoft, given the emphasis they put on it? And I think that's something that could and should happen in the coming year.
So Microsoft doesn't share org charts with us. I thought that actually Phil was actually at one point, or might even still been reporting to Terry, even after his promotion. Right. And so I'm now wondering, since Terry's no longer there, if Phil is actually all the way at the top now. They haven't detailed out how that works yet.
Yeah, so I don't remember when this happened, last fall or whatever. Phil Spencer was elevated to the senior leadership team at Microsoft, which created not a unique situation, but a near unique situation where someone on the senior leadership team was also the direct report of someone else on the senior leadership team. I mean, typically you would assume that people on that team would all be equals from sort of a corporate structure standpoint. It's right. No one said where he is in this organization.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question. So if you look at those different groups, I suppose he falls under that experiences group, I guess. I mean, it doesn't make sense. He would be under Jason Zander. Why would Xbox be under Azure? So, I mean, but it seems like they should just be a separate thing. That's how I would.
It is. I don't want to say it's a two-horse race because you absolutely have Nintendo in there. But Microsoft, in my opinion, and maybe I'm slightly biased, I think they have the biggest advantage in console gaming because of Windows, because of the gaming, and because of that cross-platform, and because they have cloud. They just need to find a way to capitalize on it, and they know that in that market, unlike Windows per se, they have still a lot of room to grow.
Yes. That's a cute way to say you're losing, but yes, yes, they do. You're right. And actually, It's funny. There's been a conversation lately around esports and things like that, and people are like, I don't understand what the big deal with esports is. And I said, well, you understand what the big deal with sports is, right? I mean, that people watch other people play games.
Hmm.
You understand that's a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? Esports is working out to be the same thing. There's an astonishing movement out there where people are watching games. That's why Microsoft made their version of Twitch, whatever they're
Yep.
calling it this year, Mix or whatever, and Mixer, formerly Beam. It's Microsoft has this opportunity to combine audiences from two major gaming platforms into one, which is what they're
Hmm.
doing. I think it's huge. And then they have this opportunity for the future, which we know is cloud-based, to be a delivery method for those games to all devices, which is, I think, the point of that intelligent edge bit. Not so much around gaming, but
Yeah.
that it's cross-platform. I mean, how many times does Microsoft have to do stuff on another platform before people realize this is the company now? It's not all about their client platforms. In fact, it's almost never about their client platforms.
Yeah. To throw some numbers behind the esports gaming. So so there's a big league called the Overwatch League, which is the professional gaming league for Overwatch. To
Okay.
get a professional spot, according to the most recent rumors, which was roughly in early February, it could cost around $60 million to buy a
Oh,
spot.
jeez. Well, yeah, I mean, there are YouTube game streamers who are making millions of dollars a year. I
Yeah.
mean, uh, these guys are essentially professional athletes. I mean,
Yep.
they're only using their fingers, I guess, but they're making a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a
Some of
lot of money in that. They're saying 10 million people watched the first week of Overwatch League, which was in early January. So I mean, there's a
them. Okay.
lot of eyeballs there. What
Yeah.
was the Super Bowl at? I don't even know actually. But
Yeah. Who knows? It's in some millions of dollars per 30-second,
yeah.
time
Do
frame.
you remember how many people watched the Super Bowl? I'm curious actually.
I don't know.
How many watched Super Bowl 2018? Let's see if Google brings it up. 103 million. So
Yeah.
still 10%
Yeah,
of the Super Bowl.
well, that's a U.S. only phenomena. You could kind of
Yeah.
compare it to, how many people watch the World Cup or whatever, and
Hmm.
how many people watch, these esports things. How many people watch a typical NBA game or an NBA playoff game? How many people
Yep.
watch, the World Series or whatever? Esports is probably already pretty close. I mean, it's kind of amazing.
No, it really is, and that's why Microsoft is trying to get on top of this. We'll see if these adventures pay off for them, but there's still a
Yeah.
lot to noodle on, and I'm curious to see how these changes shake out. You got anything else for today, Paul? Before we wrap it up from Colorado.
Yeah, I'm at Northern Colorado University in beautiful Greeley, Colorado. And we're going to be going down to Denver and then back up to Fort Collins because that's what we're doing. It's a lot of driving,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to be pretty much my day, unfortunately. So I had a little bit of time to write today here. I skipped out on the tour. Um, there's been a lot of y'alls going on here. You know what I mean? Like it's good kind of that kind of vibe.
All right. I just imagine you going, y'all got any better Wi-Fi? I got to write.
Yeah. No, actually, the Wi-Fi is great.
Yeah.
It's been really good.
And what machine are you using?
This is the ThinkPad X1 Carbon, actually. I also brought the NVX2, X2, yes, of course. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually using the ThinkPad for this.
Very, very interesting. Well, there's a little bit of sunshine out here. It's been raining for, I don't know, 40 days and 40 nights, but the grass is green. If it dries up, I'm actually going to have to cut my grass this weekend in probably 50-degree
Wow.
weather. But
That's fantastic.
getting there, getting there. I need it to be about 60 degrees by about 3 o'clock. That way I can golf at 11 a.m. because that means it'll be low 50s. But, life will go
Yeah.
on.
Nice.
So, well, folks, I think that wraps. Oh, not on it. One day we'll find a
I
better
like
solution
the picture,
here.
by the way. This is that the windows on the inside looking out kind of thing, or on the outside looking in?
Yeah, so this is, people are wondering why I have a baby up here that is definitely not my kid. This is from the Windows 10 advertisement, the initial one when they announced Windows 10. And this is a little boy, he's like looking outside, looking in. I thought that was pretty appropriate because now Windows is on the outside of the senior leadership team looking in, trying to get their attention.
Oh, that's a good point, too, actually, real quick. I don't believe there was any talk in that memo about whether or not any of those people he mentioned would be on the senior leadership team, right?
Right.
I wonder.
None of them are.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if any of them will be. Interesting.
We'll find out. All right, folks, so that wraps it up for today. And make sure to check out collaboratelab.com/FRD or click the little advertisements. And we'll catch you right back here on Monday, where we'll have a little bit of a hangover session from what all this stuff happens. And as more things shake out, we'll keep you updated. But have yourselves a wonderful Easter weekend if that's your thing. And we'll catch you on Monday.